Ladies and gentlemen, please take your place. We're about to begin. Prof. Bruno Neri, co-chairman of the symposium, will give his welcome address.
Thank you. Your Holiness, Rector, authorities, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the scientific and organizing committees, I welcome you to the first symposium, the Mindscience of Reality, the science that studies the interaction between mind and reality. The symposium was born from the agreement between the University of Pisa and the Istituto L'Amazon Capa, signed in February 2016. The rector, Professor Paolo Mancarella, and the director of the Institute, Dr. Filippo Scianna, will take the floor after me to explain the goals of this collaboration and to give a personal greeting to the participants in this event. Just a few words to explain the title and the target of the symposium. With the term mind science, we intend an approach to the study of mind which integrates the point of view of the Western science with that of the Eastern cultures and traditions, based on the introspection, meditation, contemplative practice. These different approaches represent the two sides of the same coin: the prospective in third person from the Western side, the interior analysis on the other side. For this reason, we have invited as a guest of honor of the symposium His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. He represents a cultural tradition, that of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, 2,500 years old, which posed from the beginning the mind at the center of this investigation. We are very grateful to His Holiness for accepting our invitation. One of the targets of the symposium is to promote the interdisciplinary and cultural dialogue about the most fascinating subject of knowledge, in my opinion, the mind, the consciousness. In fact, physicists, neuroscientists, philosophers, Tibetan lamas, and monks will debate all together, and His Holiness will be invited to give his comments and present the Buddhist point of view about the different topics of the symposium. It will be a very exciting, unprecedented meeting. The symposium is organized in 3 sessions: mind science and quantum physics, mind science versus neuroscience, mind science and philosophy. In the tomorrow morning session, the honoris causa master degree in clinical and health psychology will be conferred to His Holiness. This is not only an homage to a person who traveled all over the world promoting the peace of the mind, the peace of the society, the peace among the nations, but this is mainly an acknowledgement of the great contribution given by the science of the mind, originated from the Indian and Tibetan cultures, to the Western psychology. Mind science was born of the encounter between different cultures and complementary approaches to the same object. We hope this first symposium can mark a turning point in the study of mind and the beginning of a new adventure of the knowledge. Thank you. Now, let me introduce for a special welcome to His Holiness a person who don't need the presentation, Richard Gere. Thank you for coming.
Buongiorno, Pisa. Buongiorno a tutti. Buongiorno. Does everyone speak English here? Pretty much everybody? I was going to have Fabrizio. Oh, is this simultaneous? Oh, okay, great, no problem. What a joy being here. What an honor for me to be here. obviously I'm an old student and an old friend of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and these symposiums are some of the most extraordinary things that one is able to encounter His Holiness and his mind as he engages scientists from around the world, neuroscientists, behavioral scientists, physicists. The first of these sessions that I ever saw was actually in Dharamsala, and it was under the auspices of Mind and Life Institute. And it was very small groups meeting at His Holiness's residence in Dharamsala in the far north, Himachal Pradesh, in India. And, I remember the first of those was over maybe, 5 days, 6 days? 5 days. 2 sessions a day. And it was a kind of an extraordinary experience because you could see everyone kind of melt their preconceptions over the course of days. And being in His Holiness's presence, having left your home, living out of a suitcase, living in a different place, Chonor House usually in Dharamsala. And there was a sense of breaking down habits of thought, habits of being, being saturated with 1,400 years of Buddhism saturating the Tibetan people, their minds and their hearts. And to watch scientists and thinkers from the West, extraordinary people, encounter that kind of deep wisdom, not just of the mind and the heart, but culturally as well. It was really fun to see everyone melt. And to be part of that was an extraordinary thing. In recent years, these have become much larger, from places in Europe, at MIT and Washington, D.C., and various other places, and in a large group here who will be witnessing these encounters. But these are truly extraordinary things. And it's easy for us who've been around it a bit to take it for granted. 100 years from now, 200 years from now, this is a period that will be thought of as a very, very special, pioneering time. When habits of thought, habits of behavior were breaking down. And these hard-won wisdoms and techniques of the East, and most specifically Tibetan Buddhism, became part of the world's behavior, the world's thinking, the world's mind and heart. For me, it's an extraordinary honor to be here and be part of this, especially in a place like this, the University of Pisa, the University of Galileo, the University of Galileo, the 17th century, I think it was. The thought that His Holiness is bringing to this came from Buddha Shakyamuni 2,500 years ago. We have the Institute of Lama Tsongkhapa, which I think was the 15th century. Is that true? I think it's 15th, 16th? 14th, 15th. So this is a wisdom, hard-fought, hard-won, absorbed, now engaging each other in a very, very special and important way. And I don't want us to ever think. And Nagarjuna from the 2nd century also. In His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we basically have the 3 great aspects of what makes a human being extraordinary. One is compassion, and the extraordinary compassion that we've all seen with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and how he touches everyone. Wisdom, which is also seen this extraordinary wisdom, deep, challenging, curious wisdom that His Holiness has, but also the skill to use both those things, to use compassion and wisdom to transform human beings, to remove all the suffering of human beings. And I think that's one of the things I was trying to articulate before, is from the Buddhist point of view, the motivation is not just knowledge, it's the genuine, complete transformation of us as human beings into beings of joy and happiness. So thank you all for being here, allowing me to speak, and now I think it goes to His Holiness. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say. The university here it seems like it was an easy thing to put this symposium together, but the president of this university, especially, took a lot of problems and negative energy from the Chinese to keep this thing in motion. And I think he deserves a huge round of applause for his courage and his tenacity.
Thank you very much for this. Now, Dr. Filippo Scianna, the director of the Institute L'Amazon Kappa, for his welcome address. Filippo.
Good morning. Good morning, Your Holiness, magnificent rector, esteemed professors and presenters. Good morning to all the dignitaries who are with us today. Your Holiness, in 2014, you came to Istituto L'Amazon Kappa in Pomaia and invited us to develop an academy of mind science in collaboration with the academic world. An ideal place in which Buddhist science and Western science can meet. An opportunity to know more deeply how the human mind functions, and on the basis of this knowledge to become able to better manage our own emotions, and thereby to improve the quality of our lives. After 3 years, we have the incredible good fortune today to find ourselves in an extremely prestigious university, one of the most important universities in Italy, sign that the willingness to engage in debate, exchange, and dialogue is strong and is shared among many. Your Holiness, your willingness to encourage dialogue between traditions that have diverse approaches to knowing the mind and knowing reality is now reflected throughout the entire world. There are more meetings, research projects, study programs that intersect various areas of knowledge, all united in the willingness to explore, investigate reality with an open and unbiased attitude. And in this, Buddhist science and Western science have found their first point of convergence. In this open dialogue, one starts to see how this investigation on the workings of the mind that took place 2,500 years ago has anticipated, in some way, the results of the most recent scientific research, and how these, with careful precision, confirm those meditative experiences. We are now after 3 years, and we owe this entirely to Your Holiness' continuous inspiration and constant commitment to create bridges between people, cultures, and educational systems. Your incredible work that is rooted in kindness, in a love for knowledge, and a love for all living beings. In these 3 years, Your Holiness, we have had the great good fortune to come to know various people and professors who have helped, supported, and contributed in a decisive ways to bring about the agreement that now links Istituto L'Amazon Kappa and the University of Pisa. So, perhaps, in a rather unconventional way, I wish to thank from the bottom of my heart Professor Bruno Neri, Professor Angelo Gimignani, Professor Maurizio Iacono, who writes very well, and most of all, the magnificent rector, Professor Paolo Mancarella. You know, we are coming from a Buddhist center, but you have already given us lessons about to manage the emotion, your determination, your courage, and during the last days, your patience. It's an unbelievable lesson for all of us. Thank you so much. So, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. And the good news is that His Holiness is with us. and we pray that you will continue to work with us far into the future. Again, Your Holiness, thank you so much from our hearts.
Thank you.
Professor Paolo Mancarella, the magnificent rector of our university, the University of Pisa. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. The University of Pisa and I personally.
I think not good morning, afternoon.
It's just after. Oh, sorry.
After our,
Good afternoon, then. Thank you.
after our lunch.
Too many applause have moved me, you know, that's the point. So the University of Pisa and I personally have today the utmost pleasure and the great honor to welcome you here, colleagues, professors, researchers, students, and all of you attending the Mindscience Symposium. Moreover, we are particularly pleased and honored to host His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, a Nobel Peace Prize that is here to enrich our scientific achievements upon human mind, with a continuous discussion and dialogue between the scientific issues and Tibetan traditions, a discussion that could not be less than fruitful. We are all eager and curious to follow the interaction process that these two different cultures and traditions will carry forward despite their undeniable diversity, or rather because of their diversity. They both will succeed in widening our knowledge in the mind studies, where although the considerable progress of the last years, a great deal still remains unexplored. Every time a scientific investigation is able to respond, providing a theoretical, a practical, a therapeutic result, that same response amazingly arouses new questions in an endless endeavor that is the research compelling secret. This is the essence and the tradition of our university that dates back to 1343, to maintain and enhance the entanglement of tradition and innovation, using its long story as a resource, a great resource, to pave the way to future discoveries and changes. In this perspective, our old university was the first in Italy to launch a master's degree in computer science, as well as a master's degree in peace studies. I'm not able to assure you that we will measure up, but we are strongly willing to walk in the same pathway traced by those eminent scientists, Galileo, the 3 Nobel Prizes that graduated here, Carducci, Fermi, and Rubbia, the many other academics and researchers that contributed to uphold our university prestige. The University of Pisa is meant to be the house of a laical and free thought, a house where theoretical knowledge, technological knowledge, and humanistic knowledge live together, feeding each other in the research, in the didactics, in the education. We are all well aware that where a valuable research and the free thought are pursued, that is where you can have a valuable didactics and an effective education. During the next 2 days of the symposium, we will discuss about different issues related to human mind, such as quantum physics, neurosciences, and philosophy. As Filippo just said, this symposium is the outcome of a memorandum of understanding between the University of Pisa and the Lama Tsongkhapa Institute in Pomaya that sealed and strengthened an exciting, remarkable network of scientific relationships between some of our teachers and the Institute members. Well, because of this, tomorrow morning there will be the awarding ceremony of an honorary degree in clinical and health psychology to His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, for his major scientific contributions in this field. The master degree, the honorary degree was formally proposed by the board of the Master Degree Study Program in Clinical and Health Psychology and was afterwards resolved by our academic senate. As Galileo once wrote, natural philosophy is written in the grand book whichever lies before our eyes, I mean the universe, but cannot be understood without first learning to comprehend the language and know the characters in which it is written. It is written with mathematical language, and the letters are triangles, circles, and other geometrical figures, without which means it is impossible to comprehend a single word. Without this, it is to vainly wander in a dark labyrinth. Well, even human mind is part of the nature, and is still a dark labyrinth. But mathematics is not enough to enlighten it. We now need something more and something different. It is therefore necessary that different scientific methods and approaches, different philosophies, Eastern and Western culture should convey, should talk to each other and help each other. There is still a long way to go to reach the knowledge and the well-being of humankind. Before closing, I would like to thank all the staff members, those people that behind the scenes made a great effort to organize this event. I cannot name them all, but each of them knows how grateful I am. Let me warmly thank the director of the Lama Tsongkhapa Institute, Filippo Scianna, and my colleagues Angelo Geminiani, Maurizio Iacono, and Bruno Neri. You know, soon after my election as director of this university, less than 1 year ago, they all came to me with a proposal of this dream that today has come true. Thank you to Richard, to all the distinguished invited speakers. Thank you to all the distinguished invited speakers and discussants for their prestigious contributions to the symposium program. To you, Your Holiness, from the university I represent and from me personally, our sincerest and heartfelt thanks for honoring our city with your presence. Well, I hereby declare the first international symposium, The Mindscience of Reality, is now open. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now we can begin with the first session. The chairman is Michel Vibol.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to chair this first session of the conference about the mind science of reality. This session, as you know, bears on the relation between the science of mind and the most advanced branch of the science of nature, namely quantum physics. You will see from the 3 talks that will be presented in this session that such relation is quite controversial and that it depends crucially on the interpretation one has of quantum physics. One may use quantum physics, quantum mechanics, or even better, quantum field theory as a good model of the global workings of the brain, but without immediate hope of disclosing the elusive so-called origin of consciousness. More daringly, one may consider quantum mechanics as a reasonably faithful representation of the deepest layers of nature, especially the molecular organization of the brain, and consider that this may bring us close to the alleged physical source of consciousness at this molecular level. But another approach, a third approach, is to remember what the founders of quantum physics pointed out, namely that quantum physics doesn't describe an observer-independent nature, and that therefore the observer, with its mind, together with its technological and mental activity, is, so to speak, wrapped up into the formalism of quantum mechanics rather than derivable from it. Your Holiness, I know that you have a deep interest in quantum physics, you have had deep interest in quantum physics for a very long time, and you have obviously a very deep interest in the science of mind. So do you want to say something in the introduction of this session about the mind science of reality in connection with quantum physics?
Not working? Oh, no, yes, yes.
It works.
Firstly, I think almost first time in West, in Europe, so some kind of seminar discuss with scientists and different subjects. Now in this case, mind and quantum physics. This sort of large gathering and organized by one university. I think this is almost, first time. So I very much appreciate. I think you sit.
Okay, thank you. Just I have to present Professor Vitiello, who is...
Yes. You know, one of my sort of weakness is once my mouth open, then blah, 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 continuously. So now whenever we have this sort of meeting, and actually I think 30 years, since 30 years, more than 30 years, you see, the dialogue with scientists started. Mainly the late Verala, now late Verala's wife now here. So mainly it's his sort of encouragement to give us. So we start this. And it's very useful. Now, two purposes. One purpose is our knowledge further sort of expand or develop. And modern science in the past is mainly external thing, matters, particles. Not much pay attention about mind. Even some scientists, they deny some separate identity, so-called mind, beside the brain, just a brain. So now, later part of 20th century, and now 21st century, some scientists, genuine, respected, well-known scientists, now begin to show interest about our mind. So, as a sort of scientific research, see more research about mind or consciousness or emotion. These things, I think, very important. So just that's the further development of the scientific research, not only external thing, but also mind. Then the second purpose is I fully committed promotion of secular ethics. For secular ethics, mainly, you see, carry the our common experience, common sense, and scientific finding. So now, recent years, some equation, some scientists now they say basic human nature is more compassionate. There are some reasons. And we, everybody, 7 billion human beings, including those troublemakers, they also come from their mother. At the beginning, you see, they tremendous sort of received love from their mother, from their parent. Without that, they cannot survive. So that's 7 billion human beings, common experience. So any person who received the maximum affection from early life, the impact and these sort of experience really deep in our blood. So now, so we, because I think
secular ethics.
Oh, yes. So then, so when we tell people, you see, the ethics important because of God, then some people may not much sort of interest. Now, ethical thing, I think a few days ago in Germany, you see, I asked, what is the definition of ethics? So according religious belief, yes, there are some certain sort of explanation. But generally speaking, I feel ethics is any physical action or verbal action and mental action which brings some happiness to oneself, to others. So that's the ethical thing, ethical action, ethical sort of mental attitude. Any sort of action, verbal action, physical action, and then mental action brings some unhappiness. Firstly, oneself, and then also other. That is unethical way, unethical. So the basis of ethical or unethical is based on the sort of happiness, joyfulness to oneself, to other. So not talking about next life, not talking about God. In this respect, not talking about Buddhahood. Just simply, you see, we everybody want a happy life, and a happy life very much related with because of ethics. You yourself carry more ethical because of the way. You feel more self-confidence. And then you can carry your work transparently. Through that way, more trust comes from other. And other people also get some kind of sort of friendly because of the feeling like that. So now, in order to, so therefore, the proper way now today's world, out of 7 billion human beings, about 1 billion non-believer. And then among the 6 billion supposed believer, some troublemakers, also there are some mischievous believer. So their belief causing more division, more violence. So these people, formally believer, but in reality, they are not implementing seriously, sincerely about their real teaching all major world religious tradition, all carry message of love. So, any person who really carry seriously, sincerely, one of these major religious tradition, automatically be very compassionate, very sincere person. But the question, why among the believer not so sort of sincere? Because lacking conviction, this inner value. So in church or temple, a few moments looks they are very religious-minded person, but outside nothing. If you sort of firm conviction about this inner value, mainly love, then love is to become part of your life. Then see the religious belief also very, very useful to further strengthening, you see, these practice like that. So therefore now, world, I think generally speaking, now facing some kind of crisis of emotion, crisis of moral principle. So now, various religious traditions, they are over 1,000 years, but not adequate to bring 6, 7 billion human beings more compassionate thing. Now, firstly, among the 7 billion, quite big number, non-believer. Then among the believer also, many of them not very sincere. Now the only method to promote this inner value, not through religious way, but through education. Education, you see, mainly, as I mentioned earlier, common experience, common sense, and then the scientific finding. So therefore, as in the past, when I explain the importance of the compassion, warm-heartedness, I often is mentioning the scientific finding. So, as a result of our meeting, I steal something.
No,
Correct.
not
Steal
stealing.
from their knowledge. I imply some other purpose, like that. So therefore, nowadays I myself also is describing half Buddhist monk, half scientist. So I never try to convert a scientist to become Buddhist, but a scientist convert me to scientist. So that's basically our two purposes. One, also the extension of our knowledge, not only particle things, quantum physics. Also, you see, I think precisely now explaining things does not exist by objectively, but finally depend on observer. Then our scientists, I think, need further research. Where is observer? In India, ancient Indian sort of knowledge, they carry investigation. So some sort of Indian sort of philosophical views. Besides this physical and mind, there is independent self that we call Atma. Then Buddha came. Yes, self is there, but not independently exist. So Buddhism say anatma theory, no soul.
No.
Usually it's a soul means something independent from this body. When this body die, soul still there. So may go heaven or may go hell. Like that. So it's the same, because of the same that meaning, same because of the concept, Atma. So Buddha say no Atma, but Anatma, non-soul theory. It often, you see, create confusion. Buddhism, you see, do not accept existence of self. No, self is there. Myself here. So therefore, you see here, these, you see, in order to, firstly, in order to, self, identify what's the observer. So in this respect, I think the quantum physicists also, I think, need more sort of knowledge. Firstly, things does not exist objectively, right? Buddhist philosophy, Chitta Mantra philosophy, as well as Madhyamika philosophy, one part of Madhyamika philosophy is the same. External thing does not exist by externally or objectively. So mind-only school of thought say that. Madhyamika philosophy, there are two. So in any way, I think generally quantum physics, for me, very useful. Or the Madhyamika philosophy say, nothing exists independently. Now even quantum physics say that. Wonderful. So now I think I may share this is one also the information. So I have to sort of view those genuine quantum physicists who not only intellectually have some kind of understanding, but deeply believe that, I think their emotion may be less when contact with some external things, good thing or bad things. Digital, kada juzi, lada nyumo namdo le sati, kada tsumi jing namdo dodati.
So Master Nagarjuna has said that through our karma, actions, and our afflictive emotions, destructive emotions, and these are called the mental projection. I mean, gives rise to our negative emotions and those of the karma.
So, one my friend, one very old, one American scientist, Aaron Beck. I think you may have heard Aaron Beck. When I first met him many years ago, I think more than 10, 15 years ago, then his age already 84. So he, you see, mentioned to me, when person develop anger, the object appears very negative, but actually 90% of that negativeness is mental projection. This is exactly, you see, Nagarjuna stated that. According to my own sort of little experience, now I realize that very clearly. So thinking deeper about nothing independently exists. Now that understanding really affects my emotion, really. So I felt quantum physicists may have that kind of sort of impact in their emotion. So recently, one article wrote by one Chinese quantum physicist in mainland China. I saw one article. He mentioned the quantum physicist, you see, they may have sort of less emotional reaction, the positive or negative or black and white. He mentioned that. So, seems to see my sort of some sort of speculation, right, confirmed now by, you see, that Chinese quantum physicist. So recently I met some Chinese from Taiwan. We discussed these things. So we already decided now, within the next few years, I want to have some meeting with quantum physicists, mainly from Taiwan, and if possible, from mainland China. So, like that. So therefore, you see, these are, you see, useful, you see, to public who too much sort of say, oh, this is good, and too much attachment. And then this is bad, too much sort of negative feeling. That creates, the sense of we and they. Too much. Actually, we are same human being. We have to live together on this planet. 7 billion human beings, we have to live together. And too much sort of distinction, they and we, that's the causes of violence. And then those people who are very rich, but to poor people, completely sort of indifferent way. These also, you see, I think the wrong perception. So in order to promote sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings, now they say we need some sort of, the method to reduce too much sort of we and they, that kind of sort of attitude. So here, I want to, because of implied way, apply the quantum physics sort of, theory, like that. So, quantum physics, I feel very important. Then science of mind, I may say, with sort of apologize. Western psychology, compare ancient Indian psychology, Western psychology looks like kindergarten level. So, in ancient Indian, over 3,000 years, see, because because of their practice, all the Indian sort of spiritual tradition, you see, carry practice of meditation. We call shamatha and vipassana, single-pointed meditation and analytical meditation. So automatically, more explanation how to carry this practice. So automatically, more explanation about mind, about emotion. So ancient Indian psychology, highly developed. So now, like material thing, we never say this belongs to West, this belongs to East. No. Now this knowledge also, you see, common, should share every human being. So therefore, I think you already knows, you see, the ancient Indian knowledge, something useful in modern time. Similarly, the scientific finding, particularly quantum physics, very, very useful. When I get meditation, if I want to say meditate about shunyata, I often thinking quantum physics, very useful, like that. So this kind of meeting, I feel, for promotion of ethics, I think very useful. That's second purpose. Thank you.
So thank you very much for Your Holiness for having set the ethical background and motivation of our research about mind and quantum physics. So now I will give the microphone to Professor Giuseppe Vitiello, who is a professor of theoretical physics at the University of Salerno in Italy, a specialist of quantum field theory and also of quantum biology. He has worked a lot about the application of quantum field theory to certain biological systems, and especially the brain. Thank you, Giuseppe.
Okay, first, good evening. Now is not anymore afternoon. And I would like to thank you. I would like to thank all of you to be here in a nice day. And especially, I'm so honored to be here. And for that, I thank you, the organizer of this conference. I do not mention their name anymore. Okay, it appears my slides. And can you imagine the challenge? I'm speaking as first one after what His Holiness said about quantum theories. I mean, it's really, but I came from the south, and so I try to act as knowing something, which is actually what the scientists do. Let me enter just in the middle of the story. When we say physics, when we say science, we make reference to what is called canonical formalism, canonical mathematics. Galileo the book of nature is written in mathematics and so and so. But such a mathematics, the one we have today, is just for closed systems. Conservation laws are true for closed systems. But we are talking about living matter. We are talking now about the brain, about consciousness, mind. These are open systems. So, strictly speaking, we could not say just one word as a scientist about those things because we do not have the mathematics, which is our tool, our lens through which we see the nature. This is the key message, let's say, which I give to you and on which I would like to have a discussion in the discussion session. But let me go, since time is very short, please tell me when I have 10 minutes left. Since time is short, let me go through the slides, and I will jump some of them just because of time. And so you see in the title, well, when I was preparing these slides, I only had a conversation, a phone, a Skype, also conversation with Professor Neri. And he told me about what was going on, what was the discussion, the theme of this meeting. However, I found by listening His Holiness in tune what I was writing with what he was saying and asking for. So, for example, I put in the title matter, because matter is matter. I mean, we cannot live. And I put mind, and also consciousness, of course, because it was. And then from information to meaning. You know, meaning is something which is not objective. Meaning does not belong, the meaning of this object to me does not belong to this object, to this microphone. Neither it belongs to me. It's a relational phenomenon. So to go from syntactics to semantics is a big problem. And actually, we do not know how to do it, even in linguistics. So from information to meaning, in such a word, meaning, there is a lot of passion, a lot of, a lot of emotion. Because things are meaningful when they create something where they are meaningful for us. And for myself, something might change its meaningfulness in different periods of my life or even of today. So meaning is really something which we should aim as a scientist to introduce in our considerations. But let's go on, how it works here. Yes. Oh, next. Okay, next. Beautiful. You see, miracle. So, a quantum field theory analysis. And I will try to tell you some features of this model of the brain on which I've been working, which is called dissipative quantum model of the brain. Please, the model is quantum, not the brain. The brain is what we observe in neuroscience laboratories. But this brain cannot be understood without going to a quantum theory. This is the proposal we do. And let me start with a few questions. Why quantum? Why dissipation? Why fields and not just quantum mechanics? There is a big difference between quantum mechanics and field theory, but let me go on. Next. Does not work, no more miracle. Miracle just once. Next. It works. So, I will not spend much time telling you about quantum mechanics, how quantum mechanics was discovered. Let's say it was discovered because it is a feature of nature in which we are included as observers. There were some phenomena at the beginning of the past century and at the end of the one before, like black body radiation, radioactive materials, atomic model, photoelectric effect, blah, blah, many phenomena, which were there. It was possible to observe such things. But what was going on was that the classical, so-called classical physics was not able to give an explanation of those phenomena. When I say explanation, I do not mean to explain, but just to describe in some mathematical terms what was going on in such a way to make prediction. And the canonical formalism, which was and is the only thing we have, is still valid, of course, even after quantum mechanics, and is necessary in any case, but is not sufficient. So this is a way in which science develops always. Is just very rare, the case in which we say something is wrong. We always find some better way of describing things. And we always look for a continuity of the descriptions. But in any case, this was the situation. Next. And to do that, what people was doing? Just imagination, no rules. Ad hoc proposal motivated solely by the fact that maybe that proposal was going to work. Just that. No ideological reasons, no, at least for the worker in the moment in which he was trying to work out a description for that phenomena. Of course, this required a lot of courage to oppose to common beliefs, which were at that point just prejudices. And humbleness. Sorry, I'm wrong. If it does not work, I change the model. Making no definitions. As far as we see, this typical expression as we start our paper, as far as we see, domani un altro giorno, maybe everything will change. Does it work? So you see, science gives questions, not answers. This is the point. But this is already in the tradition and in the formation of a healthy scientist. But not all the scientists are normally healthy. Next. There were difficulties, but I will not spend time on this fact. History is complicated always, and the life of people is complicated, so life of science is complicated. We could go over, but however, one notation. There is only one physics. There is no classical physics, no quantum physics, no modern physics, whatever. Physics is just one. We aim to a unified view of the nature, which includes Maxwell equation, Schrödinger equation, Dirac equation, everything. Okay, this is the main point of the story. Every novelty is a novelty because it connects well with new phenomena and with old theories. Next, please. Well, there is a long list of the first 25 years of the 20th century were just an explosion of things. I just mentioned, of course, Einstein relativity, which was, however, something apart to quantum mechanics. Of course, Mach's quantum energy, and de Broglie wave-particle duality, and Pauli principle, and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. There are libraries of books on the uncertainty in quantum mechanics. However, next, there is nothing most certain than atomic spectrum. If you want to know if on Sirius, let's say, there is or not nickel, you look at the atomic spectrum which reaches us, and after that you are certain that there is or not the nickel on that planet. So all of this is can be matter of discussion, but I would like to stress such kind of situations. Next, please. In 1928, Dirac proposed his equation to combine quantum mechanics with relativity, with special relativity. That was the closing of the era of quantum mechanics. Of course, quantum mechanics still today is very much alive and useful, and we will have still many applications, just unbelievable applications which at this moment we cannot imagine. But quantum mechanics ends as a theoretical scheme, ends with the Dirac equation. Because then quantum field theory was born. I'm sorry, I look just at those people. I should look also at you. But this is, in any case, so this is the situation. Now, which one is the main difference between quantum mechanics and quantum field theory? I used to say, of course, this is completely orthodox. I'm not telling you anything new. This is just what you say to the first year of quantum mechanics or quantum theory course to your students in any university. There is the Stone von Neumann theorem, which you could explain, describe in this way. Quantum field theory is like a book. In a book, there are many pages. Each page is different from another one. Quantum mechanics is just one page. In quantum mechanics, you can only describe one phase of your system. If you have a magnet, you only describe the system in its magnetization state. If you want to study the transition between a magnetized object and non-magnetized, the same object, you put your magnet in the oven, it becomes non-magnetized anymore. So, if you want to do that description of this phase transition, we call it, you cannot do with quantum mechanics, because it's just one page. You have a two-turn page, and in the next page you find the other state of the same piece of material. Quantum field theory is the collection of all these pages. So in quantum field theory, you may describe phase transitions. Now, you see, this is just what we want, because if we want to describe living matter, or even a brain, living matter is far from the equilibrium matter. Is continuously undergoing phase transition. When there is no more phase transition, the biological system is a dead system. If it is alive, it's continuously moving. So this is why you need field, quantum field. There were those questions at the beginning. After, of course, great success of this theory and so on, till today, QED is quantum electrodynamics. QCD is quantum chromodynamics, namely the dynamics of quarks. But let's go on. This is not our main task here. Please, next. So, at the end of the story, you see, I was really shocked because there must be some kind of entanglement between minds. Because here, this slide talks just about one of the main objects which today have been repeated and said and stressed by His Holiness. What we talk about is the division problem of the world into parts to which an individual existence can be attributed. These two words are by Rudolf Haag, one of the fathers of quantum theory. I call it this idea of dividing things, each one existing by itself, I call it the ontological prejudice. I need to believe that I am Peppino Vitiello. Peppino is a nickname for Giuseppe, as every Italian knows, but it's the same now of the one that will get out of this room. It is for my psychological stability. But that is not true, because I will be another one. As I am another one with respect when I was having lunch, fortunately, sitting at a very nice table in one of this room. This was called by Ernest Cassirer, this idea of splitting the words in pieces, each one independent by itself, the ingenious vision of the world. Just a first attempt of describing the world. The fact is that things are related each other, and we cannot separate. And why quantum is so important? Because in quantum you have a clear example of such things. Not only. But you have also something else which brings directly to what His Holiness was telling us, namely coherence. Coherence is not synchrony. If you have an orchestra, you listen to the orchestra, not to the single, let's say 100 players. A big orchestra, the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra is a very large number of players. You listen to the orchestra. Because the players play, it is in synchrony. They are in phase. To be in phase, if you have many elements, in quantum theory, you may have a coherent state. Coherence means sharing the same phase. Here, in some sense, we are in a coherent state, because we are sharing the same thing which I'm saying, and each one giving its own meaning. So a coherent state is a beautiful state because it's a collective state made by many elements, but does not cancel the individuality of each one. What I'm telling you, you see, as a physicist, I'm really happy and passionate and emotionally touched. I would say every day, but today even more because such a presence of such, okay. You see, what I'm telling you, every word has a correspondence in a formula, in a writing, some mathematics. So I'm not telling you a story, an interpretation, but I can erase this page and write the formula explaining in mathematics what is written in words in this slide. Let's go on. Next, please. So what is life? Schrödinger, 1944. Up to that moment, quantum mechanics, Schrödinger, one of the biggest father of quantum mechanics, he went to talk about life, and he was observing that regularity only in the average, I take his word from that book, What is Life, emerging from statistical mechanics, is not enough to explain enigmatic biological stability. You see, you had lunch, I suppose, so even if you had no lunch, there is a biochemical storm going on in each one of you, in your brain, a storm of bioelectrochemics. Nevertheless, you are so attentive Your brain is so stable. The functional activity is so efficient. How this can happen? The classical physicist expectation is Schrödinger, which would say, well, let's make a statistics. Far from being trivial is wrong. So you need quantum theory. This was the Schrödinger idea. Next, please. 5 minutes, okay. Forget about these things. Okay. So the brain is an open system, I told you. If you want to study the brain, and this Lashley has been a neuroscientist, these things should come out some way. Yes, thank you. If you want to study the brain, you need to consider the environment. You cannot do, you do not have the mathematics to do. So you need to study the brain, and I call it its double. The environment I consider to be the double of the brain, but the brain is the subject, of course. Each one of us has a brain. Each one of us has a double. So we are, I don't know, 200, I don't know how many inside here. We are 400, actually. So you see, we have a problem. We have to put together not 200 people in phase, in a coherent set, but 400. Because you are my double, I am your double, and each one of us. So this is a social, we came in this modeling of the brain to a social dimension of the brain. Why the double? Because if you are not interested in a specific aspect of the environment takes what the brain gives and gives what the brain takes. Okay? So you have to invert in without. In an easy way, you change the sign in front of the time variable when you describe one or the other one. So one is the time reversed in time, the time reversed image of the other one. You see? In this way, you close the system, and you can work out with canonical formalism. But what happens then? It happens that you have a continuous dialogue with your brain, with your double, which is the world in which you live, the world tries to change you, and you try to change the world. So this dialogue might be a real conflict sometime, but it's a dialogue which never ends as far as the subject is alive. It happened to me just to let, when you teach something, you have to open things. So it happened to me to say in a conference, well, perhaps the act of consciousness resides in such a dialogue. So the act, my consciousness, and in this moment, is floating in this room because it belongs to you. And your consciousness, in your consciousness, I am there because I am telling you these things. And all of us, we have just one act of consciousness inside here. You see, this is also this one. I could write the Hamiltonian with the formula about these words, but it would be also a little bit stupid. But in any case, this is the result. So I wrote a book where the title was trying to give such a message, My Double Unveiled, because it was there, only I did not know that it was there. By working out these mathematics with the doubling of the degrees of freedom, considering the time mirror image of the subject, I came to such double. I use the word double because it's a literary metaphor very much used and so on. So we came to a social brain. And when I should stop. And 1 minute, okay. When I do something, because the brain works through a cycle of action-perception cycle. I take this in my hand because I have a perception and I bring from here to here, so there is a cycle. I take the responsibility of these actions I am the subject of. So it becomes ethical. There is an ethical dimension involved, where ethical means responsibility towards all of you. I should stop for such a responsibility. This ethical dimension is intrinsic to our dimension, to the brain working dimension. But where is the mind? Just that, and then really I go away. You see, if I want to go away, I must look at my seat, and I should plan how to go there. To do that, I resume my already experiences, perceptual experiences, which I already had previously in some other occasion. So I need to go a little bit back. But who is going back? Who gives me such a possibility to go backward in time, to double? And when I do such thing, this is a mental activity. The mental activity is making a plan with some prediction. Then, with Galileo, I go to check if such a prediction, if such a plan fits with reality. If it fits, that's fine. If it is not, then I make a new plan. So this mental activity of going forward and backward in time is possible because the brain is an open system, and as we call it, is a dissipative system. Please, just if you can go on, there is a picture. Yes, this is Walter Freeman. I was so lucky to work with him. He was the real neuroscientist. I'm just a physicist. And please, next one more. And this is Hiromi Umezawa, from which I learned such a way to look at the brain, because he was writing a paper just on this line. Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Thank you.
Sometimes experts, the explanation very detailed, then more confusion comes my mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Giuseppe. And now the next speaker is Massimo Pregnolato, professor of medical chemistry at the Department of Drug Science at the University of Pavia, Italy. He is a specialist of quantum biology and its implications for psychiatry. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can I have the slide, please? Welcome, everybody. First, I would like to thank the rector, Professor Bruno Neri, and for inviting me and all the staff doing his work today. And I want to dedicate this talk to His Holiness Dalai Lama. And if you give me the slide, I start soon. Takes time, the computers to start. Okay. The first slide, please. Next one. Okay. This talk is divided in 3 parts and try to answer 3 important questions. And the first one concerns quantum biology. Recently, it has been suggested that the operation of certain biological structure is governed by quantum phenomena. The question is, what evidence there is that the operation of certain neural structure also by to laws of quantum mechanics? I wrote a recent review paper on this topic entitled Quantum Neurophysics from Non-Living Matter to Quantum Neurobiology and Physiopathology. This is published on the International Journal of Psychophysiology, and it contains hundreds of references on this topic. So if you want to go in deep in this quantum biology, this is a good starting point. Quantum biology is defined as the application of the feature of quantum physics to biological objects and structures. At the base of quantum physics, there are phenomena like superposition, non-locality, entanglement, and tunnel effect. And research where this characteristic and the Planck constant are mentioned belong to the realm of quantum physics. Apart from this, ionization and the formation of chemical bonds, as well as biophysics, are reactions which at the base are quantum physical. Next one. Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founders of quantum physics, wrote his book, What is Life, in 95, and was the first physicist to deal with quantum biology and its extension to DNA structure. Later, in 1962, Pierre Olav Lodin published the proton tunneling as another mechanism for DNA mutation. In his paper, he states that there is a new field of study called quantum biology. This work, in that year of Cold War, has been classified by US Army, but now is unclassified. You can read all this research. Next one. Later, in 1968, the physicist Herbert Froelich proposed that coherence, similar to the Bose-Einstein condensate, one of the basic features of quantum physics, could exist in biological system called cells, cells. He said that the idea that coherence could be at the base of biological oscillation. More recently, there is a demonstration, experimental demonstration of this effect in this paper of Katuna, and has been published in 2005. Next one. So we can call Schrödinger protein all the protein, the chemical structure that can manifest quantum phenomena. It has been shown that quantum coherence in electron transfer in photosynthesis lasts for a long time, 600 femtoseconds, in the pigment protein complex. This was been published on Nature in 2007 from the Engel group, and it was one important step in the experimental evidence of quantum biology. Next one. Later in 2010, Engel demonstrated also that the quantum coherence can persist at physiological temperature. Next one. In the same year, Elisabetta Collini published on Nature the evidence for quantum coherence sharing of electron excitation across the 5 nanometer wide proteins under biological relevant conditions, suggesting that distant molecules within the photosynthetic proteins are wired together by quantum coherence for more efficient light harvesting in this kind of algae. Next one. And now I want to introduce to you the Penrose-Hameroff-Orch OR model of consciousness. In his 1989 book, The Emperor's New Mind, the British physicist Roger Penrose suggested that the quantum mechanics is involved in consciousness. In his 1994 book, Shadows of the Mind, he suggested that the structure involved in quantum cognition might be the protein structure called microtubules. These are found in most of our cells, including the neurons in our brain, and act as quantum computers. Next one. Microtubules are cylindrical polymers composed of two kinds of proteins, the alpha and beta tubulins, and it has a diameter of around 50 nanometers, and it can vary in length from some nanometers to some centimeters. And these microtubules have optical, electrical, and quantum properties that may explain long-distance intracellular communication processes. Next one. The tubulin is also a Schrödinger protein. According to Amar-Penrose theory, tubulin exists in quantum superposition of different states and function like a quantum bit or qubit. Next one. Penrose observed that quantum superposition, an object in two states simultaneously, equated to two space-time curvatures in different directions, a bubble of separation of the fabric of reality. But the separations are unstable, and after a certain time, will spontaneously self-collapse to one curvature or the other, and this is called objective reduction. Next one. And so in this model, the tubulins in microtubules started to develop a certain coherent state during a time. And as you see in the graphic, at the beginning, you have a classical computation inside the microtubules. Then it accumulates this coherence state of superposition in a certain time, around 25 milliseconds. And then just in one moment, that is the now, the being, they collapse. They collapse and return in the classical state. Each one of these moments can be a moment of consciousness. So, next one. So, in our normal experience, the collection of this being, this moment, this now, after 25 milliseconds, it seems a stream of consciousness, like in a movie when each single frame seems stopped, but if you move all these frames very quickly, you see the movement of the movies. You can see that when you administer the anesthetics, you can stop completely this process, and you have the anesthesia. Anesthesia, that means the stop of consciousness. Also, it has been demonstrated that in a heightened experience, like meditation or altered states of consciousness that you can obtain with drugs, you can have this kind of phenomena more close in time. So, while in dreaming is more dilated. Next one. So, the interior scheme of dendrites in quantum isolation phase is explained because in the liquid solution, sol phase, actin is depolarized and microtubules communicate in a classical way. While during the gel phase, so when they change the phase of the water, microtubules become isolated from the environment and then enter in quantum superposition, where each tubulin function as a quantum bits or qubits. And these two phases alternate around at 50 Hertz. Next one. Then later, Amerov and Penrose updated their theories, but for reason of time, I go quickly, and so give me next one. Next one. And they stated that inside a tubulin, it is form some kind of hydrophobic channels in a helical winding patterns, matching Fibonacci geometry. And Bando Padai had evidence for ballistic conductance and quantum interference along such helical pathways, which may be involved in topological quantum computation. Next one. This is not the only model of consciousness in physics. There are are also many other. One is the Craddock-Tuszynski model that describes classical and quantum information processing in microtubules, but based on a double quantum well potential in the interior of the tubulin dimer, which, within which a mobile electron is considered capable of occupying at least two distinct quantum states. Next one. And of course, there is the Umezawa, Vitello, Freeman's quantum field theory models of brain dynamics that we already have seen. And here you can see Professor Vitello with Umezawa in 1990, and the cover of his book, My Double Unveiled. Next one. Another model is the Bernroeder ion channels model, where quantum information system in the brain is driven by entangled ion states in the voltage gate ion channels of the membranes of neurons. This is very important because it's the most close to classical neuroscience study of the brain. Next one. Next. And one of the last model is the phosphorus spin model of Matthew Fisher. He said that phosphorus spin could resist decoherence for a day or so, even in living cells. And he studied these Posner molecules that combine calcium and phosphorus, and he said that they can be entangled inside the cell in the brain, and this is a new model, a new theory that I found in this kind of field. Next one. So the second part of my talk concerns a new approach in quantitative psychiatry. What will change in the mind science and neuroscience if it is demonstrated that brain processes are governed by quantum phenomena? It is possible that psychopathological diseases such as depression and psychosis involve different states of consciousness through the biological interface called cytoskeletal quantum nanowire network. All this field has been studied in recent time, starting from 2012 in Fano, where a group called Quantum Paradigms of Psychopathology meet and discuss this topic. Vitello was present at that meeting, and also the guest of honor of the meeting was Kerry Mullis, Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Next one. What is the quantum cytoskeletal nanowire network? It's the collection of all the microtubules and actin filaments that can be viewed as computationally relevant nanowire networks that operate within neurons, providing several functions, among them the connection of the cell's nucleus with the postsynaptic density. Next one. Next. In 2013, in Palermo, the group QPP meets again, and all the proceedings have been collected in this review published on quantum biosystems. Next one. And then meet again in 2014 in Bologna, Italy, and this meeting, you can see many of the people involved in this meeting, states that both quantum logical and quantum physical approach to mind and brain promise to generate avenues for better comprehension of neurophysics in psychopathology. Next one. So the role of microtubules in psychopathology, according Wolf, Craddock, and Tuszynski, the dysfunction occurring in mental illness might be expected to cause abnormal tubulin oscillation between polymerization-depolymerization cycles, resulting in different race mixture. So depression for example, could result from too little type 4 behavior of polymerization, depolymerization, which is associated with information processing system. Classical and quantum information processing in brain microtubules could be impaired in mental illness to the extent that such information processing modes are validated by experimental support. Next one. And then in 2010, with Massimo Cocchi, I published this paper of the interactome hypothesis of depression. Next one. This hypothesis started from the evidence that lipid rafts preferentially accumulate GS-alpha protein during depression. Next one. The GS-alpha protein interacts with tubulin, and this can modify the polymerization of microtubules. So the evidence, next one, is that in a normal people with no depression, starting from the gut nervous system, the second brain, and going through serotonin transport through blood inside the platelet, give a regular transfer of fatty acid to the main brain of neurons. And this is working so well that you have a correct post-synaptic interaction between tubulins, GS-alpha, and polymerization, depolymerization of microtubules. Next one. Instead, during the depression, you have an abnormal platelet fatty acid composition, a modified membrane of the neuron composition, and this can affect through several protein-protein interaction, can affect the polymerization, depolymerization of microtubules, altering the gamma synchrony of the brain and altering the state of consciousness. This is quite a reductionistic view. I changed my mind from them, but it was published 7 years ago. Next one. 5 minutes. So I can finish only the second part, and maybe I can leave the third part of the talk in the next section where we can discuss together this matter. So you can see our consciousness as a part that is classical, is emerging, and share classical information and can be monitored in the brain with the neurocorrelate of consciousness, and is what usually neuroscientists study. Then, at the level of 10 minus 9 meter, you have an interface where you go in the realm of quantum consciousness and quantum information. Is interesting because Schrödinger protein interactome and the cytoskeleton nanowire network is a very interesting biological interface for a potential expression of consciousness. And what is under this level is also called unconsciousness or collective unconsciousness. Next one. So to finish, I published a new definition of the mind that is called the non-algorithmic side of the mind. And we stated that the mind is formed of 3 parts. The classical mind that can be studied with psychology, and the unconscious mind that is a quantum consciousness and quantum computation mind, and the non-algorithmic side of the mind. I can't go in deep to this part because it's very complex, but I go to the conclusion. Next one. With this postulate, we studied the quantum logic of the unconscious and related it to schizophrenia. Please go to the last slide, the last one. Okay, no, one, okay. So I would like to thank you for the attention. And in this slide, you can see a picture that I do by myself. And I believe I belong to the quantum art movement, where scientists and artists meet together. Sometimes scientists became artists, and sometimes artists want to become scientists. So with this movement, we are trying to merge one part that is very rational inside us with another part that is more emotional and creative part, and to develop better our living. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Prenolato. So now I invite Professor Federico Fagin, who is a researcher, a specialist in semiconductor technologies and integrated circuits. He has been the CEO of companies that invented and developed touchpads and touchscreens of computers and smartphones. He now devotes his time to research in consciousness. Thank you, Professor Fagin.
Your Holiness, magnifico Rettore, cari ragazzi, studenti, signore e signori.
Dear
It's a
friends,
real
ladies
pleasure
and
to be
gentlemen,
here to talk about a model about the nature of reality as a co-emergence of semantic and syntactic realities. Next slide, please. So we experience two realities: the inner world of sensations, thoughts, emotions, and feelings, and the outer world of space, time, and objects. The sensory brain system of our body takes information from the outer world and processes it to create an image within our consciousness, but we don't truly know what the outer world is. We only experience an image that is produced by our brain-body computer. Now, consciousness, within this view, is the capacity that we have to have an inner experience which is based on sensations and feelings, what philosophers call qualia. Most scientists believe that the outer physical world is all that exists. They also believe that the image created by our body is veridical, that is, it is a good approximation of what's out there. They also believe that consciousness is a property of the body-brain. The fundamental consequence of these beliefs, these dogmas, are that there is an objective world out there, that the inner world has no reality, and that meaning and purpose do not exist in the universe. They are human constructs. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to challenge these fundamental assumptions, and let me give you a premise that scientists continue to find major surprises. For example, electromagnetism 250 years ago wasn't known. Now, we can explain almost everything that happens in our world with electromagnetism. Special and general relativity quantum physics were not known 150 years ago. Quantum field theory, dark matter and dark energy, it from bit, and so on, are new ways to conceptualize reality. Scientists also tend to declare meaningless, most scientists, not all, what they don't understand. For example, junk DNA. 98% of our DNA was supposed to be meaningless, to be just leftovers of evolution. Quantum biology, that is a new way to look at life as a quantum system as opposed to a classical biochemical system, and so on. To claim that the outer world is all that exists, despite the clear evidence of the existence of our inner world, is at best a shaky hypothesis. To claim that the inner image of the outer world created by our body-brain is veridical goes against the evidence of both physics and evolutionary theory. And tomorrow, Professor Hoffman will explain much more this portion. To claim that consciousness is a property of the body-brain requires an explanation. Scientists, most of them say that consciousness is an emergent property of a complex physical system. However, that is not an explanation, because consciousness is unlike any physical property. If it was another physical property, well, they would be right to say so. Or at least it would be plausible. Consciousness must be a material property only if one agrees with the postulate that everything that exists is material. However, science has not proven this postulate. To the contrary, the fact that consciousness cannot be explained by physics tends to falsify this postulate. Furthermore, physicists cannot even explain what matter, space, energy, and time are. They can only create mathematical models describing relationships between symbols to which they attribute physical properties that can be measured. In classical physics, matter, energy, space, and time, I simplify as MEST, are independent variables. They don't depend on each other. That's the physics of Newton. With special relativity, space and time were found to be two aspects of one entity, space-time. Also, matter and energy were found to be two aspects of matter-energy, related by the famous E equal mc squared. Now, with general relativity, matter-energy and space-time were found to be dependent because matter-energy influences space-time. So MEST is actually one entity with four interdependent aspects. In cosmology, the Big Bang Theory explains the birth of our physical universe as a fluctuation of the quantum vacuum that created an explosion of matter, energy, space, and time, an explosion of MEST. Then elementary particles condensed out of the MEST soup. However, elementary particles are not separate from space-time. Next slide, please. To treat physical reality as matter-energy interacting in space-time, as if matter-energy was independent from space-time, is reducing a holistic system into a machine, into a reductionistic system. Moreover, quantum physics has taught us that MEST is entangled. This means that certain properties of elementary particles are non-local. It means that they influence each other instantly, independent of distance. Therefore, there are correlations that propagate, so to speak, much faster than the speed of light. The speed of light is no longer an absolute limit. with these properties, locality and reductionisms are out. They are not. They are simplifications of a more complex reality. Moreover, quantum physics taught us that elementary particles behave as both particles and waves. They also taught us that between interactions, they exist in superposition of states, which Professor Vitello explained earlier. And the actual state that will manifest in the following interaction can only be predicted probabilistically. Therefore, determinism and local realism are out. Furthermore, in the Big Bang, the substance, so-called substance, that created the universe emerged from the quantum vacuum. Therefore, the quantum vacuum must exist before and sort of outside MEST. Not yet, please. So the mystery is pushed ever deeper into things and could be crazy properties. In other words, quantum vacuum becomes like a magician hat, where you take out all kinds of properties that you cannot explain how they happen to be. Next slide, please. Despite all these findings and evidence, living organisms are still studied mainly as classical reductionist biochemical systems, as if only the particle aspects of MEST existed, and as if the superposition of states had no impact. I personally think that living organisms are quantum information processing systems, open systems of still mostly unknown nature, and consciousness hides in the wave and the entanglement aspects of MEST, the properties that connect the parts to the whole. Those are exactly the properties of consciousness. The comprehension of consciousness is parts connected into a new comprehension, which is a new whole. Most scientists believe that meaning, purpose, and creativity emerge from randomness. I think that meaning, purpose, and creativity are instead properties of consciousness. We make sense of the world, comprehension, because we have an inner experience made of qualia, made of sensations and feelings, and we affect the world through that comprehension. Nature has both feed-forward and feedback processes. Physicists tend to only see feed-forward processes, in other words, for elementary particles, to atoms, molecules, and so on, to organisms, and they don't see the process from conscious decisions all the way down to particles. Meaning has nothing to do with symbols. A symbol can carry a meaning only if something gives it that meaning. That something is consciousness. Next slide, please. We need to scientifically investigate the hypothesis that consciousness is an irreducible property of reality. Let's start by calling the substance out of which everything that exists is made energy, with capital E. And let's postulate that the fundamental property of energy is self-reflection. I will explain what that means. Let's also postulate that there is a void, just like the quantum vacuum, and that energy emerges from the void, just like MEST emerges from the quantum vacuum. The difference here is that in the act of creation from the void, energy perceives itself. It reveals itself to itself. It self-illuminates in this self-reflection. So that's the act of knowing itself. Self-perception is then the fundamental property of energy before the existence of MEST. In this model, cognition comes before matter, energy, space, and time. It is a property of reality more fundamental than mest. If we start by cognition, we must then explain the emergence of mest in terms of cognitive principles, not materialistic principles. We need a new physics that starts from cognitive principles based on symbols and their meanings rather than physical-only principles where symbols have no meaning. Next slide, please. Recently, Professor Dariano and others have derived quantum physics entirely from informational postulates without recourse to any physical postulate. This important result indicates that no ontological principle is required to derive the laws of physics. Therefore, physics describes meaningless interactions of symbols because there is nothing within physics that gives meaning to the symbols. In the model I propose, ontology rests with the cognitive aspect of energy. And physical reality only represents the interaction of symbols used by an invisible hierarchy of conscious entities to communicate with each other. In this model, reality has two irreducible aspects or sides, like a coin. The semantic reality, the reality of meaning or inner reality, and the symbolic reality or outer reality, the reality of information. Meaning and ontology are properties of inner reality, symbols, information, and syntactical rules are properties of the outer world. Though in principle only inner reality might exist, no cognitive purpose could be achieved without conscious entities communicating with each other to know themselves. Next slide, please. Consider a book. A book is a collection of symbols obeying syntactical rules. The properties of symbols can be predicted probabilistically by information theory, just like the properties of elementary particles can be predicted by quantum physics. The meaning of the book, however, does not reside in the book. It resides in the consciousness of the reader of the book and completely depends on the reader's prior knowledge, prior comprehension of the meaning of the symbols. I am free to write whatever book I want. Nonetheless, my future book will certainly obey the syntactical laws of symbols independently of the meaning of the book. Physics can only predict that all future books will obey the syntactical rules or laws of symbols, but it cannot say anything about meaning. In other words, free will is unlimited with regard to the meaning a conscious entity wishes to communicate, but it is highly constrained by the syntactical laws of symbols necessary to communicate the meaning. Outer reality mirrors inner reality to the extent that a conscious entity comprehends the symbols' meanings that are expressed by the outer reality. Perception and comprehensions, therefore, are two related by distinct fundamental aspects of consciousness. Next slide, please. Perception involves the conversion of physical symbols into qualia, into sensations and feelings. That is called the hard problem of consciousness. David Chalmers coined that phrase, a philosopher. Comprehension, however, goes way beyond qualia, because comprehension involves the conversion of qualia into meaning. Now I call this the hardest problem of consciousness, because we have no idea how consciousness can get the meaning out of what we feel. What we feel is so deeper than the meaning that we can extract at any point in time, that it takes a lot of work, personal work, communication, so on, to get more meaning out of the feeling. If you feel love, how can we describe love with symbols? We can only describe the meaning that we can get. But there is still residual meaning inside of us. We cannot express that until we understand we comprehend what that meaning is. So, the model that I postulate is that energy exists as a superposition of units of consciousness, CUs. This is like the superposition of quantum fields in quantum field theory. Now, this means, for example, that an electron, the quantum electron field within this model is actually conscious as a field, not as the individual electron. The individual electron is like a symbol, is what is emitted by the quantum field to communicate with other quantum fields. So the electron is simply the symbol of the interchange of communication, but the meaning is within the field. So conscious entities then are hierarchical combinations of conscious units, just like atoms, molecules, and objects are hierarchical combinations of elementary particles, because the semantic space is reflected into the syntactic space. Each CU in some way, it's not a one-to-one reflection. There has to be a translation from syntactical to semantic reality. So I'm not talking about a one-to-one correspondence here. I'm talking simply to a transformation that is non-algorithmic. Each CU is endowed of a unique identity. In other words, it knows itself as itself and perceives the totality of energy through its unique cognitive framework. In other words, each CU has a cognitive framework. It looks at the totality of what exists in this space in which it lives, which is not the physical space yet. In this space in which it lives, perceives the totality of energy through his own private way of looking at reality, unique private way. That perception, however, doesn't imply that, 5 minutes, yeah. Does it imply that the self actually comprehends what it perceives? The two aspects are not, one doesn't beget the other. Moreover, the CUs can fashion symbols out of their own energy to communicate with each other. A symbol, envision a symbol like a ripple within the energy field of the CU that creates it. Thus, symbols are not separate from the energy field of the CU. Therefore, this model is monistic, is not dualistic. Information is a interpretation of energy by other CUs. The distinction between field and symbol is made by the CU. And the meaning of this symbol is dependent on the comprehension of the specific CU. A symbol is like a particle in space-time created by the corresponding quantum field. Next slide, please. So I will describe briefly the CIP framework that captures all this discussion. It is essentially a framework that shows the fundamental interaction of this model of reality. The superposition of all CUs creates what I call cognitive space, C space, which is a semantic space. It's not a physical space. Therefore, it exists outside of space and time. Or before, but in a sense that doesn't involve time. The superposition of all symbols creates information space, I space, and I space is a syntactical space, not a physical space, and also exists before MEST. The totality of what exists is an invisible dynamic wholeness called one. The dynamism one arises from the never satisfied urge to know and fulfill itself. And this is taken as the fundamental cognitive postulate of this model. One knows itself through the ever-growing multitude of communicating conscious entities that it creates. The communication process involves the transfer of meaning from one self to the other, from one conscious entity to another. Communication is indispensable to self-knowing because it requires each self to comprehend the meaning of its own qualia, its own feelings, due to the need to encode meaning into symbols, as well as decode other self-symbols into meaning. Next slide, please. I'm almost done. The communication process, however, can create involuntary distortions, miscomprehensions. Miscomprehensions will generally imprison selves by obstructing their true self-knowing and will misdirect their free will into ever more voluntary, quote-unquote, evil creations. To liberate the selves from their cognitive distortions, it is necessary for the self to incarnate into an information processing symbol, the body, that interacts with the hierarchy of other symbols in a physical universe. The purpose of the incarnation is to manifest the consequences of the distortions in a safe environment, quote-unquote, to provide the necessary feedback to the self to see the distortions for what they are, leading to their cognitive dissolution by liberating the energy that is trapped in the distortion so that it can experience, in other words, know its true nature. The incarnated self perceives the physical universe through the specific information processing performed by the body. The perception is called P-space, for physical space. That's what we perceive. We think that it is an objective world, but it is our creation. It is how we interpret the creation of our body. That is not reality. It is an image. It is what I-space feels like to the self that is identified with the body. Next slide, please. Said differently, the body controlled by the self selects a small subset of I-space symbols and constructs an image that the self believes to be the real world, when it is instead a virtual world. Each self creates a different P-space, and the correlations between P-spaces enforce the belief of existing in an objective world. When the incarnated self is completely identified with the body, it will pay attention only to the symbols created by the body. Spiritual awakening occurs when the self begins to question the reality of its perceptions and opens to directly perceive the I-space symbols, not through the body, directly, rather than the symbols transformed through the information processing done by the body. The C-space, I-space, and C-space is a model that I'm proposing. I call it the CIP framework, and it provides a rich interpretive framework to understand the fundamental nature of reality as an interaction between two emerging, co-emerging semantic and syntactic realities representing two irreducible aspects of one. Within the CIP framework, the evolution of our meshed universe is not due to randomness. It is a reflection of the ever-increasing and never-ending self-knowing of one, driven by the fundamental cognitive principle. And finally, last slide, please. The semantic space and the symbolic space are the two indivisible faces of one that mankind has divided within his mind. The time has come to unify them within our consciousness, the heart of each of us, and this is what is achieved. This is what it means to achieve the union of science and spirituality. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So I think that it's time for you, Your Holiness, to ask some questions and make comments about all these nice, very nice conferences and talks. Thank you.
I think the first part, the quantum physics 저는 가다 던진 거는 주요 말이지. 다 오늘 탄핵도 저하시게 그래서 다 된중 뒤죽 세시고.
So, Professor Giuseppe Vittil, you talked about there being no objective existence according to quantum physics. And in that case,
but that does not mean nothingness. Things are there. It's actually we feel. Now, objectively, does not exist. But there is because of the things there. So now, concept of truth, ultimate reality, and conventional level. So since nothing independently exists, so these conventional things are interdependent, interconnectedness. That's one thing. Then I think consciousness, when you try to explain consciousness, take for granted
So your explanation of consciousness seems to be a reductionist idea, a reductionist. I mean, explaining consciousness on the basis of, you're taking for granted as almost that you can explain consciousness on the basis of the physical things. But that's difficult.
Now, with this connection, I have one question. I personally met some young children who remember very clearly about past life. How can I explain? So physical level, entirely new body, new brain, new cells, or like that. But I met two Indian girls. Clearly remember about past life. So one girl in Kanpur, when they came to see me, one young girl expressed very clearly, precisely about name of previous sort of parent and relatives and house like that. So their memory is so convincing. So the previous two parents also now accepted this young girl, their daughter. So now that girl, 4 parents. So then one Tibetan boy born in Lhasa, he insists, my home is in India. Then reach my place. Then the boy say, no, this is not my home. My home is South India. Then the two parents goes with that boy, and then when reach South India, one Tibetan settlement, then the boy, oh, my home there, that monastery. And when reach there, then that boy say, this is my room. And then also, remember one of the box, his glass there. So that the young boy say, my glass there. And open, yes, there's a glass. So these are fact. So we cannot deny these things. So then we need some explanation how.
Okay. So I told you since the beginning that how challenging for a physicist is to be here. Of course, to be, I do not have any answer about such kind of memory of these glasses in that box, but neither of the other two girls. But one thing I could say, may I have my slides, a couple of the last ones, which I did not show. However, and also about this, reductionism through which I look at consciousness, So let's split the questions in two parts. Let me start in the while these slides do not come to me. Please. What I should do? They are not here, not yet. Okay, so the first part about reductionism. I would say just the opposite. Yes, thank you. If you can, okay. I would say just the opposite. I would say that a reduction of consciousness is the one which binds such a phenomenon, I mean consciousness, to some specific biological molecules or elements, like a microtubule or something like that, which indeed is not, I disagree on that kind of a vision, although that is a part of the story. However, in this vision, consciousness is a collective phenomenon. When I say as a physicist a collective phenomenon, means that it's a dynamical phenomenon. So just the opposite of being reductionist, because it comes from such a relation between the subject and its double. And all of this has nothing of reductionism. Is indeed just the opposite. In any case, I do not even dare to say that that is consciousness. I say the act of consciousness. Just because I do not know really what is consciousness. But what I know is that if you take a system and you close it, I mean a subject, and you close it, you isolate it, this is a physical penalty you give to him because his body suffers. If you close it, there are experiments, closure, isolation, bring to loss of consciousness. So, since this openness to dissipation, the dissipative character of a living system is a central character. And this character is not by itself a reductionist, because it comes as a system character, not of single elements. An atom is not dissipative, but a system of atoms can be dissipative. So, this is about the reduction vision of consciousness. I don't think is a reductionist, but that is not a problem, maybe. The other aspect of this young people remembering things which clearly they were not there or involved in those things. Of course, I do not have an answer. However, could you start from the end of these slides and then going up? Then there is something which comes always in these studies, and is the fractal nature of all this physics. Yes, now to one before, and then to one before. Yes, maybe we could stay here. So there is one aspect which comes up in all this study, namely the fractal nature of all these phenomena. Fractal means that you might have something which you can watch it, and you see that there is no scale. You can take a zoom of a smaller part, and this smaller part looks just like the larger one, and so on indefinitely. Or you do the opposite, you go larger and larger, and the system looks always like it was in the previous step. So we say that there is self-similarity. Now, I did show a theorem in which you could say that such self-similarity is described by a coherent system. So coherence looks to be the basic law of nature. Now, I do not know if those two girls or young people, young boy, were perceiving such coherence. If we could say, I do not know, but this is what I would try to investigate, if they were in phase with such a coherent basic structure of the universe, where universe includes also living matter, of course. But this is just to guess. The point, the last, as you see, the last slides I had in my coherence appears as the universal morphogenetic paradigm. So maybe to be in phase, to be in harmony with the world, if we consider ourselves and our double, maybe this is the dimension of our being. This does not answer to your question. I would like very much to tell you, yes, I know how this can happen, but I do not know. The only thing I can say is what was my last conclusion, which I told you in words instead of showing this. If you could give me the slide before, maybe there is something, not one more, this one. You see, through such an approach of quantum field theory and realizing such a fractal structure of nature, which includes living matter and brain, you reach indeed an integrated ecological vision. So this is the point which, for a physicist, not for a philosopher maybe, but for a physicist, since this is the result of some mathematics, is very gratifying. There is another problem about a detachment of something from matter. There is a danger. The danger is that those 7 billion of persons out there which wants our support, our effort in doing things, maybe we could reach the conclusion that they are not there because the physical reality does not exist. So they do not exist, which is very comfortable if I don't want my hand dirty in order to help them. So it's very important to be in phase and I would not state anything about the existence or not of the external world, because we do not know. What we know is that there are 7 billion of persons out there, and there are earthquakes, how do you call, uragani, and so on, which we have to do some for those things. This is...
So I really appreciate all these presentation very clearly, and the presentation carried with conviction. I appreciate. But these matter, I think our generation cannot sort of take conclusion. We just start to raise more questions, then let investigation continuously. And after, I think, few decades, I think more concrete idea may come. Thank you. We're going to meet again tomorrow. So, I want to watch the presentation after lunch better, or before lunch, morning better. I want to see. Sometimes full stomach, full stomach, our mind may be more resting. Morning, more fresh. Thank you. Thank you.